right? And he's so much more better for the 5 hours that he's spent in there. And he comes in and he's like, you know, and he goes ham on like Piccolo. I was going to say Pickle.
Well, but it started off with Piccolo, you're right. And then he became a good guy, and then Vegeta, then Frieza.
Yeah. And then he just goes crazy on them. And it's easy to look at the 5 hours and be like, okay, like this is taking really long. But really, like in God's time frame, it's like, okay, it's 5 minutes and I'm better off for the 5 hours I spend or the 5 years.
You mentioned actually a lot of things without I don't even think you realized it. I would say the first one is the first thing that stuck out to me. There's no order to what I'm going to say, but you recognize that it took time.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. On one of them, a freaking whole year. And I'm just like, because I would tell my counselor, I'm like, what am I doing with my life right now?
Yeah.
And she's just like, well, we're discovering that together.
Yeah.
You know, but yes.
So it sounds like you are learning to remove a timeline to what your version of quote unquote health or the promised land looks like.
Yeah, and I will tell you that it's the hardest thing for me because when I initially look at stuff, all I see is the timeline. And then in the same breath, I have to be like, but God, I have to trust you. Because you can do in 5 minutes what would take humankind 1,000 years. And I constantly have, like, that is one of my Achilles heels. I'm looking at the timeline like, God, I feel like time is passing. God, another year. Like, you know, this birthday came by and I'm like, another year. I'm getting closer and closer, you know? And like in the same breath, I have to be like, man, but you serve the God of this universe. You know, I'm always reminded about that chamber that Goku trains in.
Oh, that's a hyperbolic time chamber. Yeah.
And I'm just all like, okay, in God's hyperbolic time chamber,
Yeah.
like,
Well, real quick, explain what that is, because a lot of people.
What's the name of the show?
Dragon Ball.
Dragon Ball Z, yeah. So I watched Dragon Ball Z because I have an older brother.
Let's go.
And also because I was never allowed to have the remote.
Great show.
But there's these heroes, and there's like literally this spear/room that you go into and you train in. And what is the timeline on that?
So an hour in the hyperbolic time chamber is 1 minute out here.
Yes.
So if it's 5 minutes here, if all you have is 5 minutes in our world, if you go into the chamber, you actually get 5 hours.
Yeah.
So it's an accelerator of training because it puts time on your side.
Right.
For you to, like you said, for the heroes to train to be their peak self so they can be
So
their
there's
best
like
against the villain.
an actual war going on, and they're like, "Where's Goku?" You know, and they're like, cha 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 cha, fighting and everything, and things are blowing up, and you know, Goku's in the hyperbolic chamber, and he's like training, and he's in there for 5 hours, getting the 5 hours worth of training, and then when he comes out, he's only missed 5 minutes with the real world, right? And he's so much more better for the 5 hours that he's spent in there. And he comes in and he's like, you know, and he goes ham on like Piccolo. I was going to say Pickle.
Well, but it started off with Piccolo, you're right. And then he became a good guy, and then Vegeta, then Frieza.
Yeah. And he just goes crazy on them. And it's easy to look at the 5 hours and be like, okay, like this is taking really long. But really, like in God's time frame, it's like, okay, it's 5 minutes and I'm better off for the 5 hours I spend or the 5 years or the 500. I don't think I'll live that long. But if I did 500 years that I spent training and being formed and stripped and put back together by God.
Yeah.
Because when I do go into the war against my own Vegeta or my own Frieza, I can go Kamehameha on them.
I love this so much. You would have known we were going to use a Dragon Ball Z reference.
Who would have known, like, 11-year-old Juvie would have used, like, a Dragon Ball Z reference?
Well, what I love, this is so good because essentially what you're saying is you have and still are continuing to learn to submit your timeline to the Lord. Mm-hmm. And as you're doing that, not just in spending time with him, but also submitting the idea of, this is when I think I'm supposed to be here.
Yeah.
Versus allowing the Lord to go, God, when do you want me here? Where do you want me? And when do you say I get to go there? Yeah. Talk about, I guess, the freedom you're finding in that. I know, of course, it's hard in the releasing, but as you have released and as you continue to release, what I'm hearing is there's the initial action of, I have to make the intentional choice. And then there's the constant daily action of, I have to stay here. Mm-hmm. What's the freedom of that on the other side?
Yeah. So it's kind of like when I was, oh my gosh, sorry.
It's okay.
When I was dealing with depression really bad. And there was a moment and I was like, God, I've been battling this for a really long time. There's nothing really I can, like nothing seems to be changing. I feel like I'm praying, I'm fasting. I've been literally begging. And I was at a conference and they're like, hey, like if you need prayers for anything, like just come and pray, or like have prayers. And I was like, and I'm at the point, I'm just like, what can this hurt? Mm-hmm. Like at this point, I've tried everything, right? So I go and I find a prayer partner and they pray over me and they're done. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I remember walking back to my seat very disappointed. And I'm just like, God, I feel no different. I feel zero difference. I still feel the same. And so I go and I find my seat and I'm standing there. And the Lord was like, Chubi, you can choose not to pick that up again. You can just lay it down today and I'll pick that up. And I was all like, oh, okay. So the ball is in my court. Mm-hmm. So that's what I have to do with my timeline. It's when I'm tempted to pick it back up, I'm just like, you got to trust the greater thing here. Mm-hmm. You got to trust that God is, like, I think for me, it really comes down to that statement. I have to trust God is who he says he is, or I am literally wasting my time. Mm-hmm. Like, everything else I do beyond that trust process, it really, to me personally, it's a waste of time. Then why am I going to church? Why am I reading? Mm-hmm. Why am I going through counseling? If God is not who he says he is, then this is all a colossal waste of time. And to me, it just falls into that of trusting. And I think for me, when I had a hard time letting go, it's because I couldn't trust God is who he says he is. Not I think, I know. Like, I just could not fathom that there is a God of this universe who loves me, who has the best plans for me, and that he will not let the story be wasted. I couldn't believe that. I'm just like, sounds good in theory. Mm-hmm. And it sounds good in like lifting my hand. Oh yes, clip. Oh yes, Mm-hmm. But I didn't believe it. I didn't believe that God was who he said he is. Is that proper English? Probably not. Yeah. So because of that, I've decided I'm gonna, take my life into my own hand.
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this, be sure to check out some of our other stuff on this page or check out our podcast on Apple and Spotify. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing. See you there.